I'm supposed to use this, so I will. I'm Arden. It's time for us to start. Welcome to this session. I'd like to see by show of hands how many have been here before. Oh, so you folks will be able to tell recognize the lies I tell. Or the contradictions that come out of the process. So let me, maybe I ought to put these things back at the back. Everybody gets a straw before they leave today. The purpose of this session today is primarily, I think I've got enough to go around, don't you? I had a bunch at home and got off without them, and so I had to go find staples, and so I've got a good 1,000 of them and make a gift to everybody, put it on the side of everybody's plate tonight at the banquet tonight. This is advertised as a place to learn two things particularly. One is how to extend your range, and the other one is how to change the quality of your voice. Are there some other things that you'd like to talk about while we're here? If there are, I'll make room for them, and if there are not, we'll sort of focus on those things. Anybody? Any thoughts? Here you go. You get a gift from me. Yeah. They call me the straw man. So I didn't hear anybody's hands go up. So I didn't see any hands go up. So let's go ahead and start on the topic that's at hand. We're going to find ways to extend your range. Could I make you the straw man today? Thank you. So everybody gets one that's coming in. Let me tell you a little bit about what will make your voice work well. If you can figure out how to keep your air flowing from your lungs out through your vocal folds, you'll sing a whole lot better and sing a whole lot longer than if you don't do that. Unfortunately, most of us don't do that. And if we would only do that, it would improve the way that we would sing. It would improve the way that we talk. It would improve the longevity of our voices, not only from 1 hour to the next or through a whole night, through a whole week, through a whole life. And that represents a shift in expectations for most of us. So I belong, just recently I was appointed to the board of the National Center for Voice and Speech. And one of their therapies for finding voice health is the simple use of a straw. The theory behind the use of a straw is that your throat is about an inch and an eighth in diameter, your trachea. And when you get a stream of air coming up through your trachea, and then it passes through an opening this big, it's going to create a bottleneck. It's going to create what would be called positive pressure upstream. All the air molecules can't get out, and therefore you can feel the consequence of that positive pressure. Would you all put a straw in your mouth and just make a sound and blow through it? You can feel way down into the bottom of your trachea that positive pressure build up, and that sort of inflates the whole of the system. For most of us, our vocal folds serve not only as vibrators, but they serve as gatekeepers to control the exit of air. And if they find themselves confronted with an enormous onslaught of air, they'll stiffen against it. If they find the lungs starting to be out of air, they'll tighten to kind of make do with the amount of air that's there. And so they start to play two roles. And it would be better if they only played one role, and that is just to serve as vibrators. So the straw is a means of helping to ensure that the air flows. Now you'll notice, those of you that were here before, you'll remember that the last time I was here I had a regular drinking straw. And this time I've got a straw that's of a smaller diameter. And the scientist that's the chairman of the Center for Voice and Speech indicated to me just a couple of weeks ago that the diameter or the width of that straw is about as far open as your vocal folds open when they're in the open phase. If you don't know how the vocal folds work, they move back and forth. And as they move back and forth, they chop the stream of air that's coming out of your lungs into little pulses. And those pulses, depending on how many pulses there are in a second, determine what pitch you speak at and what pitch you sing at. And so As you go higher in frequency, the vibrations increase in frequency, and the pitch rises. So, but it's just taking the airstream and chopping it up into little pulses that make sound. Well, when you you can make a sound, but when you recondense it by putting the straw at your lips, you can actually feel the air kind of reconverted into stream of air, and you can feel it change as it goes higher and lower. And we'll come to that a little bit in a minute from now. But what I'd like to ask you to do now, we're in the conversation having to do with how to change your range, how to expand it, hopefully. So would you put this straw in your mouth, and would you glide from the bottom to the top of your voice like this? I'll demonstrate. Just do that. So some of you are saying, this little straw won't let enough air out, and I can't make it work. And if you run into that trouble, then what you do is you take the straw and you put it right toward the roof of your mouth, and you hold it in place with your tongue so that the stream of air, instead of being a big burst that then has to be funneled into this thing, is already channeled into the straw. Give that a try again. How many of you felt two distinct qualities as you went through your range? That you have a shift of gears, if you will, a yodel, if you will. How many of you felt that? Well, that's kind of normal, because your body is divided up. The muscles that control your throat have two antagonistic muscles, one of which has the purpose of activating the voice when it's in its high range, and the other one is more active in the low range. And so in the low range, your vocal folders are kind of short, and they're thick from top to bottom. And so you get this kind of a vibration. It's really buzzy. Men especially will feel it buzzy down into their chest with energy backing up down into their trachea. And most men speak in that range, and a lot of men try to sing in that range, and the men that try to hold on to that sensation find themselves kind of limited on how high they can go, because those muscles can only stretch to a certain level, and then they kind of have to pass the baton through the other muscles. And the other muscles control the light range. Many men call that their falsetto. Women have a high range and a low range the same. And since those muscles are kind of antagonistic to each other, those ranges kind of split apart. And that splitting apart is one of the things that causes people to become self-conscious about their singing, that they either can't sing down into the low range like they want to, or they can't sing into the high range like they want to. And the trick is to be able to figure out how to make that transition smoothly. So you've got a light voice and you've got a heavy voice. And then there's a third element, and that's called a mixed voice. And that's where you get the elements of the high and the low kind of combining together. Classical singers spend their whole lives trying to figure out how to blend that light voice and that heavy voice together so it will blend imperceptibly from the bottom to the top of the voice. Some people, yodelers for example, take advantage of the juxtaposition of those two voices. They don't blend them at all. They get really good at flipping from one of those voices to the other voice and doing it very fast and doing it very precisely on pitch high and low. So it's just however you want to try to manage that dichotomy in our voice. But one of the things that will help it is if the airstream is constant. So now put the straw back in your mouth. Put your hand in front of the straw. You feel that little stream of air that's blowing on the top of your hand? Now glide from the bottom to the top of your voice and see if that stream changes in intensity. Did you get any change in intensity? Did it get more intense the higher you went, or did it get less intense? Less. Okay, so that's actually an important piece of information to discover. Because when you are trying to hold on to that lower quality, which is where we started, then you get to that certain place where it says, oh, I can't quite go above that anymore. And then you're left with a strategy, two choices. One of those choices is that you just add more pressure. You clamp down the voice a little bit, and you add more pressure. Not more flow, but more pressure. And then all of a sudden the vocal folds, instead of stretching from short to long, as they ought to, they stay about the same length, but the pressure from beneath starts to bend the vocal folds so that they're attached at point A and point B. And those point A and B in normal circumstances should be stretching far apart from each other to make the pitch go up. But for some folks, not just for some folks, for most folks, the pattern doesn't happen that way because you don't know how to do it. Instead, they sort of, point A and B stay at the same distance from each other, but you start adding pressure from beneath. And at that point, the vocal folds will vibrate, but they'll start to bow upwards from point A to point B. And as they bow upwards, they'll get thinner. They'll stretch longer. But it's always an external force that causes that to happen. As a result of that, you have a lot more pressure to sing high notes. How many of you folks, as you sing men that sing high notes, feel an awful lot of strain or pressure on your throat when you go up high? You folks are the ones that are using pitch change by adding pressure. How can you tell somebody that's adding pressure? It is that the higher they go in their range, the louder their voice gets. The louder the voice gets. And that's because it's got more pressure under it. And so that can sound sometimes like being upset, being angry, being aggressive. It can have sound qualities that are antisocial. And as the result of that antisociality, then people, the dancers on the floor, don't feel as comfortable because the voice ceases to be as friendly and inviting as it ought to be. So the trick is to figure out how to change your perceptions of reality. I'm going to take this straw, and you'll hear me flip into that lighter voice, and it'll sound pretty wimpy. And then I'm going to take the straw out of my mouth, and I'm going to sing the note that I would normally sing, keep the breath pressure the same, everything's the same, but I'll start to reinsert natural human resonance. Of course, the straw, when it's in your mouth, sort of wipes that resonance out so it doesn't sound human anymore. It sounds like a kazoo. It sounds like something inhuman. Now, watch this. Now, that doesn't sound strained. That sounds sort of operatic, and that's not exactly what you are looking for. Except when you sing operatically, they'll certainly salute and do what you want them to do because it's got a lot of intensity in it. But it takes no pressure at all, and it doesn't sound, when I'm in the straw, it sounds like a falsetto. When I take the straw out, there's no way that that's a falsetto. Let me do it again. You hear it flip? And even opera singers don't do that. That's kind of silly. It's really high. That's the kind of stuff that the people that sing with, I'm trying to think of their names, the men that sing way up high and the women that like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, they go up into that range. And they get that, they're able to get that because their vocal folds are no longer stiff. Their vocal folds, who used to have the responsibility of sort of holding back to make sure you didn't run out of air, they give up that responsibility, and then they just flap in the breeze. And when they flap in the breeze, then the stretch from short to long becomes easy. The muscles that are controlling the heavy side of your voice, the low side of your voice, have the responsibility to shrink the vocal folds short and make them thick. And those muscles, for most American males, they'll go to a certain stretch and then they'll just not stretch anymore. And they have to learn how to let go and let the other muscles take over. It's just like a marriage. You know, men are that way. They just won't stretch and give. It's kind of that way in your voice as well. So now, I want you to get used to this straw. So we're going to sing a little song together through the straw. And so what I'd like to have you sing is Home on the Range. Just join with me. Feels really weird, doesn't it? We're not done yet. We're about to go to the chorus, which is a whole lot higher than the other one. But you notice that stayed pretty much in the low range. And so that's comfortable. And then we go, oh, I'm on the range. It's kind of scary. So just screw up your courage, and here we go. Now you know what an oboe player feels like. You know the oboe. There's just no air getting out at all. And oboe players, you've watched them when they play in the orchestra. They have this really tightened up face, and they play for 25 minutes, and then they take a breath, and then they play for another 25 minutes. There's no air getting out, except that there is air passing through the vocal folds, and that's the real important thing. There's a question over here.
Oh, okay. In using the straw, when we were singing Home on the Range, I did a little experiment and blocked my nose with one hand, and I discovered that I was singing through my nose rather than the straw, and I was wondering if that's what you intended or no.
The answer is no. That wasn't the intent. However, it's not an unusual occurrence, because when you get the air all blocked up, you all set, you get all blocked up. It's got to go somewhere, and if it doesn't go out your mouth, it'll go out through your nose, or out through your eyeballs, or out through your ears. It won't. I'm just kidding. But there's a tendency for that to happen. And Americans, our natural language, has a lazy, soft palate, and so the air on the sound often shunts up into our nose. I've wondered if that's not why some ethnic minorities call white people honkies. I'm not kidding, because there's an awful lot of nasalence in American speech that other languages don't have. We don't hear it because we're used to hearing it, and so it doesn't identify. But many of us have a kind of a lazy, soft palate, and the sound will kind of go up in our nose. And so, yeah, I think you were experiencing that you could feel the pressure, and if your soft palate doesn't close, the nasal points, the nasal ports, this air will just shunt up into your nose and going out that way. That's not the objective. Now, that was kind of a funny little experiment, wasn't it? Now what we're going to do, I'm going to apologize, I'm apologizing to the folks next door, but we're going to do this. You see what I'm doing? I'm getting the pattern started. I'm pulling the straw out to just discover what your voice sounds like. Now, I've done this with a choir of about 400 singers, and it nearly blasted me off the wall. I mean, I wasn't expecting it entirely. I knew that when you get your air flowing, your voice will make more resonant and more free and louder sound. But I got those 400 folk and got them singing and got the straw out of their mouth, and it literally just sort of backed me up against the back wall. And I was stunned by that experience. And so, again, my apologies to the folks next door. Let's start. Where the buffalo roam and the antelope play. Now, you can feel it already in your own body, can't you? That the air just sort of flows out of you. The sound just flows out of you without any compulsory means. And that's one of the things that I want to have you carry away, if I can, today. You do not have to compel your voice. You need to let your voice flow. And many of us treat our voices like we treated our children. You better do that or I'm going to get you. And that's not the way that you get your best voice. Let's go right on. Where are we? Buffalo, Antelope Play. Where seldom is heard. And that's kind of silly. Is heard word. Now that should have surprised some of you. So that you open your mouth on discouraging. And it was noisy. It was easy. But it didn't feel normal. Raise your hand if that felt just a little unusual to you. It felt a little lighter than you'd expect it to, so you'd think it was going to come out wimpy, but they opened your mouth, and there was actually a sizable amount of volume in your voice without, again, any compulsory needs. Let's finish. The not cloudy all day. No. Play the disco word cloudy all day. You think what's going on around there going, what's going on in that room? As a matter of fact, there was somebody just popped her head in there saying, what's going on? So the objective here is to understand that just this straw therapy will cause your vocal folds to become less tense. They will be more vibratory. They will take less pressure to cause them to vibrate. And they will be more efficient along the way. That still doesn't get over the fact that there's a little yodely tendency. But there's a kind of an axiom that says the tighter your vocal folds are, the more exaggerated the breaks will be. And the more released or flexible or free your vocal folds are, the more quickly and easily they'll transition from one shape to another shape. And this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period of time as you try to figure out how to realign what it feels like when you sing with a straw in your mouth as compared to what it normally feels like when you sing with a straw in your mouth. This has very much to do with how we perceive our voices. You all know the experience of hearing your voice on a recording and thinking, that doesn't sound like me at all. But the truth is, it does sound like you. It sounds like the you that everybody else knows. It doesn't sound like the you that you know. And to understand that reality, you need to understand that the tone that we sing, the frequency that we sing, the pitch, is not just a single pitch. It's a composite of that fundamental pitch frequency that we hear and a whole bunch of overtones that are stacked up on top of it. And the more those overtones are present, the more rich and full your voice will be. And the fewer of those overtones there are, the less rich and resonant your voice will be. And that there are low frequencies in that pattern, and there are high frequencies in the pattern. The low frequencies are a little... They kind of go all directions at once. And the high frequencies are a little bit more like a direction. So the sounds come out, and I did that for the sake of my wife who came this time, and she's always trying to get me to behave. But the low frequencies have a tendency to come out of your mouth, and then they wander around in the near vicinity of your body, so that you perceive your sound as being richer and fuller than it really is. But the sounds that project outwards to other people, particularly on the dance floor, are the high frequencies that are not lazy. They're very directional. And as they go out and away from you, that's what other people hear. And the low frequencies, which you perceive as being the primary identifier of your voice, are not. So the straw helps to change that. And as a result, we have this perception of what we're supposed to sound like as compared to what everybody else thinks that we're supposed to sound like. Yes, hang on, there's a question, and I'm gonna try to give you an explanation for that.
Well, not necessarily on that particular thing, Arden. I've got hearing aids. I don't ever wear them because when I do wear them, my voice sounds totally different to me than what I perceive it to be. How do I correct that?
Well, there is a really very easy therapy, but it takes more hands than I've got. And you just simply take your hands and you cup them around your ears like that. And as soon as you do that, then all the low frequencies that you're used to hearing in your own voice, you won't hear anymore. And you'll start to hear yourself the way other people hear you, where the upper frequencies go out into the room, bounce off the walls, and come back to you through your actual ear. Yes, question?
When I first started calling many years ago, I was told by my mentor caller to practice calling by singing into a corner. And I would stand in the corner of a room by myself and with hard walls around me and sing into that corner because the reflection back from the corner was what the dancers were hearing.
That's also very true. It helps you to identify the actual sound of your voice as compared to the perceived sound of your voice. This isn't unique to men. This is also true for women. So therefore, there is a kind of a learning curve that's got to change for each one of you if you're going to make optimum use of your voices. And it isn't just changing the muscle memory of what it feels like to have your vocal folds vibrate in a relatively passive way, but also how your ear hears that. And we've got feedback loops in our bodies that have been entrained for a long time. Some of us longer time than other folks. And yet, even a person who's 20, 21, 22 has already a number of years of sort of becoming accustomed to the vibratory patterns of his or her voice and the perceptions that go along with that. And so there's a kind of a shifting learning curve. Okay, so let's go back to the straw for just a second. When you are traveling to a dance, instead of talking to your partner, blow into a straw. It really will. What you need to do is to teach your partner Morse code. And then you just blow into the straw in Morse code and you communicate. But what I'm suggesting to you is that you can actually warm your voice up very vigorously and never do harm to your throat. So, we're going to do some motorboating right here. Rev your engines up. Now rev them in upper frequency. Way up there! Wake up! But do it through that straw. How many of you found yourself when you were doing that little revving exercise playing like an accordion on your rib cage? How many of you found you're doing that? That's a second value that the straw will have to you. Because what you want to do is to bear down this way. Can I get you, let's see, John, you come on up here for a second. I want you all to look, John never set himself up for this. I want you to watch John's rib cage right here. And I'm going to imagine... I just can't resist because every time I see myself in the mirror, I can tell that I'm getting older because the furniture shifted. My chest had fallen into my drawers. Okay, well, I want you to watch right here as you're not going to use a straw, but I'm going to imagine that I've got 5 birthday candles on each of these fingers, and I'm going to ask you to blow them out like this. Like that. Did you see what happened? There were little impulses. Now, I want you to bear down as if you were constipated.
How'd you know?
It kind of comes with the territory. So you can go. This is heavy weightlifting kind of breathing. And I want you to blow out those 5 candles. He can generate as much breath energy and more breath energy, thank you, by doing that as he can by doing this. And that's just another one of the little learning curves that can change. Now, why does this matter as compared to this? Because when you do this and you do it once, all your air's gone. When you do this, you can measure your air over a period of time. And you have to get used to what that feels like. It's a little bit like grunting. It goes, moan. We all try that. Just take your hands and blow and bear down on your middle, and then I'll explain what is going on. There's a lot of activity going on right around your rib cage, and that's because there's another set of muscles that are involved there. You've got an abdominal wall. The abdominal wall brings the stomach, all of your intestines and your stomach inward and upward, hopefully. Mine's not as good as it used to be, but it goes inward and upward. And then you've got your diaphragm, which sits in opposite position in kind of an inverted bowl shape. And when it flexes, it bears down. It goes down like this. And this little hand gesture that I was having you do as you were blowing out was to try to encourage your diaphragm to stay down rather than collapsing inwards. Think of your diaphragm as being like a trampoline. It's made up of stretchy material in the center and muscle fiber on the outside. The muscle fibers come out from that stretchy center and attach right underneath your ribs, right about the 8th rib, right in here. And it's a little shallower in the front and a little deeper in the back, but it's an inverted bowl. And if you think about the muscle fibers being the springs on a trampoline that give and stretch and hold the center bed taut, when those muscle fibers contract from point A to point B and they get shorter, the whole thing is going to go downward. When it goes downward, that creates that center bed that's firm but flexible like a trampoline. And when you have your abdominal muscles flexed, your viscera has to go somewhere, and guess where it goes? It goes up underneath that center bed, and the center bed starts to bow upward and put pressure on your lungs. Why does that matter? It's kind of a counterlever way of delivering the breath so that you can deliver the breath over an extended period of time instead of having it go out all at once. And the way that... Did I speak in English now? Did you just understand me? I was kind of hoping that I'd have a whiteboard so I could diagram this for you. But if you have that center bed stretched taut, then you put something up underneath it. It'll just bow up in the center. But if the muscle fibers on the side start to get lax, they start to quit flexing, then the center bed will go up, and it'll be like jumping on a trampoline where all the springs have been taken off. It has no stretchiness to it. And that's how singers get phraseology over an extended period of time. So, oh goodness, now we got this perception of our voices feeling weird as we go up and down, and they sound different than we think they are, and we breathe backwards. Let's quit now, shall we? But the truth of the matter is these are progressive things that you can work on. And while you're riding in the car, one of the things you can do is to do the little straw, put it back in your mouth, rev your engine, and try to keep your rib cage expanded and the energy going downward. And watch, you'll still get plenty of energy. Go. Go higher. You can feel there's a sense of what singers call engagement. Can you feel that? It doesn't feel sort of wimpy. It feels really connected together when you do that. Are there any questions about anything that I've talked about right now? Because one of the things that we're trying to do is to figure out how to get range extension. Let me reiterate just really quick to kind of put it into bold relief. You have one set of muscles that controls the lower side of your voice. They also happen to be the muscles that control loudness in your voice. And you have another set of muscles that is active in the high range because they're the muscles that stretch your vocal folds from short to long. And they are also very active when you're trying to be gentle or sweet or nice. And so by intermingling the influences of those muscle tendencies, the one to be strong and low and the other one to be tender and sweet and high, and intermingling them, then it makes it possible for you to have a voice that has some strength but also some empathy with it. You lady callers, when we get together tomorrow, we're going to be talking about this very issue because you all think you have to sound like a man in order to be a successful caller, and I'm going to try to talk you out of that notion. There was a hand over here. Yeah.
Hi, Arden. When you were doing this, are you pulsating with that?
I am.
That's what you're doing.
I'm pulsating with my breath. like that. And only I'm letting my voice be involved. That's all I want to talk about today, having to do with range extension. But I can't emphasize enough to you that if you will do this thing, you will discover that you have access to a wider range than you thought you did. How many, that's particularly going up the scale. How about going down the scale? Any of you want to pick up lower notes? So the women are sort of saying, yes, there's a couple of guys. Yeah, why? So that you can be like a man? No, so that you can have a completely wide range. This thing will also be of use to you too. Why? Because it removes the stiffness out of the vocal folds by moving them into a passive place. So you do this. Sorry. I apologize. That's a but ladies, just by yourselves, do that. And you'll find yourselves either on that pitch or some convenient pitch, stopping and having, while the straw's in your mouth, it sounds really kind of wimpy. And then you pull the straw out of your mouth and it's not wimpy at all, because as soon as the straw goes out of your mouth, the natural human resonances reemerge, and they take that little twerpy sound that's coming out of your vocal folds and turn it into a full resonant human sound. But just like the men going high, you feel it, and it feels weird. It feels not like what you're used to. And how do you deal with that in front of a bunch of dancers? No, that you practice lots of times before you take it into public. Thank you very much. All right, any other questions that you'd like to raise about the inflection of your voice, going high or low? It's actually a very simple process that we're not very good at, because we, in our culture, are kind of monotone in our speech inflections. I was privy to a research study done on children, and it plotted the range of their inflection when they were by themselves playing, and that they got a wide range of inflection. They plotted when they were among their peers playing. It was even a wider range of inflections, highs and lows, and among adults. And it shrunk down to nothing. When they were around adults, they learned that they were not supposed to inflect their voices. They were supposed to be sort of monotone-like, because they're trying to be what their parents want them to be. Ooh, that's really sad, because we don't really want them to be monotonic, but we don't want them to be off the wall either. And so whenever you hear somebody talking like this, you think they're a little weird, a little crazy, and especially if they talk like this. And then they're up here too. You start to think that there's something wrong with them emotionally, and that's just part of the strangeness of our culture. All right, so now let's talk about how to change the quality of your voice. There are a variety of ways that you can use to change the quality of your voice. The first one, and the simplest and the most effective one, is to just make your voice flow, like what we've been doing with the straw. When you have the air flowing through your vocal folds, there is an acoustical law of physics called the Bernoulli effect that aids and abets the vocal folds so that they can vibrate without having to be physically active. That Bernoulli effect is the same thing that causes an airplane to fly. Just by quick review, you'll know that the wing on the plane is concave on the top and flat on the bottom, and so when it slices through the air molecules that pass above the wing have to travel further and have to move faster to get to the back of the wing to match up with their neighbors that were there undisturbed underneath. And when you hit a certain threshold, speed threshold, there is enough lift. Air in motion creates suction or low pressure, and when you get at a certain velocity, it will be enough to lift a jumbo jet off the tarmac and cause it to fly. Without that principle, it would fall like a stone. But the point is that same thing happens in your vocal folds. The wind coming up out of your throat, coming through this diameter of about an inch and an eighth, comes to the bottom side of your vocal folds, and there are some membranes right on the underside of your vocal folds called the conus elasticus. And they're called that because they are shaped like an inverted cone. And they take the air molecules and they channel them toward the opening between your vocal folds, which is called the glottis. And when you get into that place, all of those air molecules are all rushing to be the first one through the opening. So there's a distinct increase in velocity as you pass through the vocal folds, those vollicules. You know what it's like to take a hose, putting a nozzle on it, screwing the nozzle down so that it doesn't get through very much. And what does get through comes through at a high velocity, right? You all understand that principle, I hope? Yes. No. Some are saying yes, some are asleep. The truth of the matter is that velocity is one of the secrets to healthy voice. If you don't have a sufficiency of velocity in your airflow, then you get breathy voice, because the suction that's created to cause the vocal folds to come to closure isn't sufficient. The vocal folds only close partially, and air leaks through, and you end up with a quality of sound like I'm getting or worse. And then some people know that they don't want to sound breathy, but they don't know to increase the air volume or the velocity of their air. As a result, they just tighten up the vocal valve, they tighten up the vocal folds, and all of a sudden you get somebody that sounds like this, where there's very little air flowing, but there's a very tight quality in the vocal sound. And that's really destructive. It's not easy to listen to either. But that tightness in the vocal valve is the thing that causes square dance callers to get tired when they are at a dance. And they'll sound really good for the first 20 minutes and then just hang on for the last 45. And that's it. It's just because the muscles in the throat get tired. There's too much compression, too much effort going on. So finding the place of that efficiency threshold is really useful. Could I get a volunteer? Somebody else besides John here. You want to come up? All right, Teresa, thanks for volunteering. Okay, so Teresa, would you introduce yourself and talk to everybody in the room? Tell us your blood type and how many children you have and other things that
are important. My name is Teresa Rutz. I'm from Waxhaw, North Carolina. I've been calling a year and a half, and I have 3 children. 2 boys in college, 1 graduating this year, so he's off the payroll, and a 13-year-old daughter.
Thank you. Don't go away. Don't go away. So as you listen to Teresa's voice, would you say that it was a pressed voice or an aspirate voice? Aspirate is this. Pressed is this. What would you say? No, it is on the pressed side, and many of us live our lives that way. So now we're going to see. What happens is that Teresa's a smart woman. She's been talking this way, and she's raised 3 kids, and she's got to be smart about something. But she's learned that in order to make her voice sufficiently commanding so that her children will obey her, she's going to clamp down just a little bit, and that'll take a relatively insufficiency of breath and make it really tight, very clear. And one of the qualities about a tight voice is that it's very bright, it's very penetrating, and it's hard not to listen to it. Right? Okay, so we're going to pretend that your boys aren't here anymore. They do make their beds. They do eat their cereal, and so you don't have to use that voice. So now I'm going to try to help Teresa to find that optimal threshold of sound. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, Teresa, is to make a sighing sound. And now put that into a pitch, like this.
Just make a pitch.
Just as gentle as you can. Okay. But it's got to have some voice in it. You hear it turned off to a sigh. This is a whisper. There's no vocal folds at all. Now there's a little vibration there. And that's more vibration. So just as gentle as you can, just like you're going to whisper on pitch. You notice that immediately, as soon as she started to make a sound, you could hear it start to clear up because she knows she wants a clear sound. How many of you, I go to church a lot, and when I used to be a kid, and it drove me crazy to have somebody next to me telling me a whisper and a secret in church, and they don't know how to take their voice out of it. So there's a whisper that should be this. It's about like this all the time, and it goes all the way through the congregation. Well, would you be that kind of person?
Not whisper well.
No. It's this.
I'm going to tell you a secret.
That's the sound I'm looking for. Now, take that, I'm going to tell you a secret, and then just pause on one of those and just let it be sustained.
I'm going to tell you C.
That's good. That's the pitch we're going to use. Okay, so now let's pretend that I had a child's pinwheel on my finger here. So I want you to blow on. Don't make any noise. Just blow on it to make it move slow. Now make it move faster. You see what your body does to make your breath move faster? Now make it move really fast. Good. All right, now go back to the C. And that's the sound that would represent the airflow of slow movement. Okay, new breath. C. Now make it go medium fast. Hear what's happening to the change in the sound? Stop. Take a new breath. Make it go fast. Here all of a sudden it's very clear, but it doesn't have that edge. It doesn't have a tight edge in it. Each one of you, thank you very much, Teresa. That was not an easy thing to do. So each one of you, pretend you have a pinwheel on your throat, on your finger. So everybody make that sort of sighing sound. It's a whispering on pitch, like this. Okay. Now, that's it. That's the pinwheel moving slowly. There's not very much air, so it isn't enough to hit that threshold of efficiency in your voice. Make your vocal fold, make the pinwheel move faster, but don't change any of the sensations in your throat. Let me pause and say the sensations that normally go along with this are you can feel the air leaking through in your throat. It wasn't that way. It felt very inefficient. It wasn't strong. It feels loose, it feels relaxed, it feels open. Those are the kind of expressions that people usually associate with this kind of sound production. So here we go. Feel it? It's very inefficient. Okay, don't change anything in your throat. And now imagine that you're making the pinwheel move at a moderate speed. You can hear that there's more sound collectively in the room. That's the beginning of the effect of the Bernoulli principle, where there gets to be a sufficient amount of suction so that the vocal folds are sucked to a closed state. When they go closed, the air continues to flow. It builds up pressure underneath, parts them, rushes through. The suction goes on, and it sits right on the cusp of being at that efficiency place, where it's not enough pressure to keep it backed up, and it's flowing, and so it's got kind of reverse high-low pressures. And if you can find that place, you can sing for a long period of time without getting tired. So here we go again. Now you got that sighing sound. Now make the pinwheel move fast in your imagination. And you could hear what happened collectively in the room, and you could also feel what happened collectively in your body. When you hit that threshold, it excites all of the empty chambers in your vocal tract, down from your throat, up into your mouth and into your head, and it fills up that empty space with sound. And there's a very distinctive vibration when you hit that threshold. That's the first and foremost thing that you can do to improve your voice quality, is to find that efficiency threshold. So if she'll be coming round the mountain when she comes, not good. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes, not good. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. And of the three options, that's the least effortful. That's the easiest, but that isn't what it sounds like, does it? It sounds really energetic, and it's just because it hits that point of efficiency. So if you didn't go any further than that, if you just stopped right there, that would be the single most important thing you could do to change the quality of your voice. Find that efficiency threshold in your own voice. So I want you to sing with me. We'll be coming around the mountain. So here's the pinwheel again. Start gentle. Now make the pinwheel move faster. And keep it moving faster until you individually hit that threshold place. You're there. You're there. Got it? Okay. Now we're introducing a new element. It's not just a single pitch. It's changing pitches. So your vocal folds are changing shape. That means you got to be on your toes, and your goal is to say, I want that threshold. I want that efficiency point, and all of the notes that I'll sing. So here we go again. Find that threshold. Sing. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Can you hear something that just happened? She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Somehow, you didn't keep the air flowing when you went low. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. And it's a law of physics that if you hit that threshold, your voice will vibrate low and it will vibrate high. It's not unlike what we were doing with the straw just a minute ago in terms of inflecting upwards and downwards, making the vocal folds passive and causing the pitch to be more spontaneously driven. Try it. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. How many of you had a moment's twinge of anxiety when you came to mountains? She'll be coming round the mountain. That's a normal behavior, but if you hit that threshold, it'll just transition for you without any worry. Try it again. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Find the threshold. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Incidentally, there was a very interesting that just happened. She'll be coming round the mountains when she comes. Now, guess what happened? At that point, somebody was, not somebody, but some buddies, was revealing that they changed pitch by pressure in their voice. Coming round the mountain. You give a bigger kick, and you get the pitch, but it's louder. It jumps out at you. And guess what else happens? When you go, coming round the mountain, as soon as you do that little gesture with your tummy, all the notes that follow after it have no more airflow, and you're just running on fumes. So let's try it again. She'll be coming around, and when you're going up to that place, it's the passivity like you felt with the straw, but with your breath going that way. She'll be coming round the mountains when she comes. And you noticed that it didn't feel natural. For many of you, it was coming round the mountain. How do I get that? Oh, mountain. You're so accustomed to the punch from beneath to get the pitch to rise that if you take that tool away, the other tool, which is the stretch in your vocal folds, it takes them a second. It's sort of like they've been out on a coffee break for 35 years. And the call from the brain comes and, what is it, Tully? Oh, us? No, I thought those guys. All right, guys, break's over. We got to figure out how to do this. And they come in and they start to figure out how to make pitch happen in the stretch of the vocal ligament. That's a very interesting challenge. Okay, so first and foremost, in terms of quality change, is finding that threshold. I'm going to just take a few moments. Would you raise your hands individually and describe, for the purpose of the tape, what it felt like when you hit that efficiency threshold, to try to put a word picture together describing that sensation. I'm going to start over here with Jerry, even though he didn't raise his hand.
Hi, Arden. It felt free. I think that's the word I would use.
The home of the free and the brave, the square dance callers that sing on threshold. That's right. It does feel free. Any other comments?
It feels more natural.
That's excellent. Come on over here. This is Monty.
It felt like letting ice cream melt in your mouth and down your throat.
Okay. It feels real soothing, doesn't it? Many people will I'm going to try to put a context on what you just said, Monty. And that is, many people, when they sing on their threshold, it feels after they've been singing for a while as if somebody has gotten on the inside of their throat and given them a massage. It isn't tiring. It's actually very soothing. And the vibration pattern is actually very comforting. It's way different than the kind of compression that you often run into where you do it and you're good at first and then it gets tired and then it gets aggravating and then you don't want to sing anymore. This is quite the reverse of that. Any other comments? Teresa, have you got anything to add?
It did get more relaxing when I hit that.
It seemed to be less effort.
And that's startling because you could all hear in the room that there was way more sound for less effort. And part of what's going on is that you're working to create an environment where the muscular energy that you generate is supplanted by acoustical energy of just making the machinery work at its very, very most efficient. Say that again.
You didn't feel the strain like you would normally.
That's right.
Yeah, I had some air left over for my next notes. I've got emphysema, so I run out of wind, out of air, and I had more air left for the next note. So
that was Dick Lee, and this is a really interesting thing that Dick talks about, because all of you, when you're using the concept of the pinwheel in motion, you all know that you're using more air than you normally use, right? Universally, people say, I'm using more breath. Why am I not running out? Why is Dick, who has to be really careful with his breath, not running out when he's using more? It's magic. No, the truth of the matter is the most efficient that your voice will ever be is when it hits that threshold place. If you're below the threshold and you're leaking air, that's obvious. You're wasting energy. If you don't have enough air and you compress your voice and then to make do with the air that you've got, then you've got an obstacle that you have to fight over, and that's an inefficiency, and it wastes energy. You go back and forth between those things, and you're so schizophrenic that your voice doesn't know what it's supposed to do. You find this threshold place, and it's just sort of planting your feet on a solid place that you won't get tipped over one way or the other. Any other comments? I'm looking for one in particular, and if I don't get it, I'll have to spill it myself. Anybody? You got anything to say, Ken?
No, just that the right place just feels most efficient.
Now, I'm going to pick on Ken here just for a second. You're exactly right. Would you say that Ken's speaking voice just then was aspirate or pressed?
Neither?
No, it was aspirate. And that is because many of us in our personal conversations spend our time below that threshold. So I want you to just introduce yourself in this kind of casual speaking voice, and then with your imagination, just accelerate the breath like you did with the pinwheel, and you'll hear his voice move from this sort of diffused quality into something else entirely different.
Hi, I'm Ken Sale from Castro Valley, California. I've been calling for about 6 years. Really enjoying it.
You hear the quality, the core of the sound that just gets really clean. And you really didn't change the amount of air that you were moving hardly at all, but conceptually it did speed up. And so many of us spend our lives 10% below that threshold or 10% too tight. It's not like revolutionizing the world. It's just a little bit different. Brad, have you got anything to add?
It feels stronger, I guess, more full.
It is that. It's acoustically stronger, and that's an important thing because when your vocal folds vibrate freely and naturally, they generate a much richer palette of harmonics than they do when they're tense. When they create tension, when there's tightness in the vocal fold, it creates something that we call shrillness. It's got high frequency, but it's high frequency that's strident to our ears. Lady callers, that's the reason that square dancers don't like to listen to you, is because you have stridency in your voice. And you have stridency in your voice because you're just women. No, just saying, I have to move around on the other side of the table. The stridency has to do with, in part, singing in the wrong range for your voice, and the other is just trying too hard. And you've also raised children and had to order them around. And so often, the complaint that comes back from dancers is that they feel like they've been told to pick up their room. There's that kind of orderly voice that says, you better do it or I'm going to get you. And that's not inducing to kindness, however, and to ease. And so if you can find that threshold, that will disappear out of your voice no matter what range you sing in. You sing in your high range, it'll sound sweet and beautiful. You sing in your low range, it'll sound rich and mature and beautiful. And it'll be perfectly easy to understand. No one understands a shrill voice well. And shrillness comes from tightness in the vocal folds, having very much to do with the threshold, being slightly below threshold and then compressing to make use with the breath you have. I'm still looking for one particular response, and nobody's given it to me, so I'm just going to have to jump in. Oh, how many syllables does it have?
I may miss it completely. My name is Art Parks. I recently joined a choral group in an effort to improve the quality of my voice. And the director of the choral group didn't like to have everyone singing in his natural voice. It had an edge to it. It was sharp and a sharp cutting quality to it. I guess it sounded too individualistic to him. And so he had us focus upon trying to blend our voice with the person standing next to him, and next to us, And it had a result where we sounded more alike, and then resulted in a group tone that was far superior to the individualistic sound that we were having alone. And I'm wondering if that's in the direction you're going. There, I ran out of air there just talking.
I'm gonna make a joke out of that. He's actually trying to induce socialized singing. No, that's a joke. In case you didn't know that, the pointedness, the sharpness that you were just talking about is that same stridency that I'm talking about. It gets an edginess, and there's no way that it can be blended. Many choral directors will try to get rid of that stridency by neutralizing all of the characteristics of all of the voices so they become neutral, and then they'll blend together. I don't happen to like that approach, although it's really common in choral settings. I think if you find that threshold in your voice, that natural balance, everybody maintains their normal voice, but everybody has a quality that is eminently joinable together in a choral sound. But I'm a real big minority in that world. All right, here's the word that I'm missing. It feels more open. When people try to describe it, they don't even know how to put it into words. They'll just simply say, well, it feels more like this. It feels more open. And the truth of the matter, it is more open. But it's more open measured in millimeters than in inches or feet. Because when your vocal folds are not tense, when they are relatively passive, and they're set in motion in this vibratory passion, their excursions open wider than if they were partially tense. You can make the Bernoulli effect happen when your vocal folds are tense, and they'll part, but they'll only part a little ways and then only let a little burst of air through, and it's usually kind of sharp in its quality. But when the vocal folds pacify themselves, then they'll open much wider. There's a larger burst of energy through each one of those little puffs that comes through, and it's much richer harmonically, and therefore more blendable than it would be otherwise. Let's see. As I was in the middle of that explanation, something came into my mind, and I want to see if I can recapture it. Open. Yeah, if it comes back, I'll mention it. Okay, so the single most important thing you can do, and not so very hard to do either, is to find that threshold of efficiency and then become comfortable with it. Here are some of the adaptations that you will have to make. You will have to give yourself permission to not work so hard. You will have to be able to trust the vibratory the vibratory patterns that come out of a relaxed throat as compared to a tense throat. And those are very distinctive from each other. Would all of you make the word up 3 times in a row? Up, up, up. That little glottal stop right at the beginning of up makes a pressed sound. So do 3 times and then sustain it. Up, up, up. You can feel it. It's kind of tight and real buzzy in your throat. Sing, she'll be coming around the mountain with that sound. Here's up again. Up, up, up. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Y'all feel it. It doesn't take very long to tell that that's too tight. Now go back and find that threshold again. Ha, 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 ha. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Right off the bat, they're not at all alike with each other. How many people have you heard sing in that pressed way? Lots and lots and lots. And lots of square dance callers do that. So the patterns are built into the pattern. Why do they do it? Because it's bright and it's penetrating. It carries, but it also takes a toll on the throat. And so night after night of using that kind of sound will cause the voice to get really tired. And so it's not unusual for square dance callers, if they're going to be doing it a lot, to find themselves in vocal jeopardy. And the right answer is to change the way that you make the sound and become accustomed to it. The acoustical vibrations that come from finding that threshold place are more subtle than the muscle tensions that reveal that pressed kind of phonation. So the threshold requires some patience as you become familiar with the patterns.
Eric Henderlaw, I have a question. I listen to a lot of old music, a lot of the Rat Pack music like this here, and in the past I just enjoyed the songs. Now I listen to them a little deeper about how those singers actually sang, the Dean Martins, and they had that kind of relaxed quality we're talking about here where they reached that point from relaxing, getting right to that optimal range you're talking about. Really a great sound, I understand that. I'm trying to balance that type of singing with what we've all been taught throughout the years about projecting and getting our voice out there for projection and bringing the dancers up. Can you address that?
Sure can, and I'm glad you did that because that makes a nice transition. However, even before I leave that threshold, I'm going to go through the threshold process again. Here is tight. You hear the brightness in that sound? It's bright and it's tight. But now listen to me find that threshold. Ah. You hear the brightness in it, but no tension in it? This is dull. It's easy, but it's below that threshold. It's warm. The characteristic of a voice that's below that threshold and inefficient is that it's warm and dark. And the voice that is off that threshold balance toward the tense side is bright and clear, but also tight and edgy. And the optimum is finding the balance between the amount of closure and the amount of breath that's flowing. I need to point out to you that if I had pieces of paper here and glue between them, some of you have seen me do this before at other workshops, that I'd hit a certain speed of velocity and the papers would vibrate with each other. If I were blowing between two pieces of onion skin, it would take less breath energy to cause them to vibrate. And if I were blowing between number 10 cardstock, it would take more to cause them to vibrate, but it would still happen. In a hurricane, two pieces of corrugated steel will vibrate together. If you get the right velocity to activate that energy, whatever's coming between them to create a sufficiency of suction, you can do that. We have a limited capacity in our lungs. And therefore, if our vocal folds are too tight, to hit that threshold means that we can only sing in very short bursts of phrases. But if we can pacify our vocal folds to become less resistant, then we will find ourselves able to hit that threshold, having plenty of breath to carry us over, having both a warmth in the sound but also a clarity in the sound. This is the tool. That's the tool that will help you find that over a period of time. Okay, there are other things you can do, however, and Eric said, how do you get the brightness? How do you get the projection in your voice? And my first answer was, find that threshold place, because it will have projection without any forced element in it. It will be just a natural acoustical element. Above and beyond that, there are some things that you can do, however. One of them is to change the way that you shape your vowels, because Americans all form our vowels in the back of our throat. Our tongues are very active in the backs of our throat, and when the tongue gets active in the back of the throat, it kills the upper frequencies in the voice. There are some sonorities in this wide range of acoustics. At the very top of the frequency, up around 3,000 to 5,000 hertz, outside of our normal hearing range in the sense of we don't distinguish it as a pitch, there's a frequency that when it's there, it arrests our attention and makes us listen. It also gives enormous projectability to the voice. Opera singers cultivate that sound enormously because they don't sing with microphones, and they're singing against a 100-piece orchestra on a great big stage. And so they cultivate that sound because that upper frequency will penetrate to the back of a big hall and sound still easy in its natural acoustics. Square dance scholars do have microphones to help, but cultivating that upper frequency is very useful. If I were to cup my hands like this and I were to sing Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam. I hear the wide range of my vocal resonance through my ears. But in the midst of that, up about 2/3 of the way, there's a hot band of energy that when I have my hands cupped like this, I can hear it. And when I take my hands away, I can't hear it anymore. There's there, oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam. And now I've tuned my ears to hear that frequency, and now I don't need my hands anymore. But if you were to go back to your rooms and do that, just take that song, cup your hands around your ears, sing. I'll get a suggestion. Ken, would you come up and be a demonstrator here for a second? All right, so Ken, I want you to sing Home on the Range, just a phrase of it, just in your normal voice.
Home, home on the range.
Okay, good. Now cup your hands around your ears.
Home, home on the range.
Does that sound the same?
No, it sounds different.
Okay, so now let's take a little longer of the phrase, and as you're going along, sing, take your hands away, put them back, take them away, put them back.
Home, home on the range.
Keep going.
Where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, but the skies are not cloudy all day.
I don't know that you could pick up what I picked up just now, but as soon as he did this, his tone changed. Because he started hearing his voice differently. What did it sound like when your hands were cupped to your ears?
Like somebody else.
The sounds were outside of you, weren't they?
Yeah.
But when you took your hands away...
Then it's what I expect.
That's right. So he's got a low singing voice, low speaking voice. So he's very much attuned to the low frequencies in his voice, and he starts doing that, and he starts to hear the high frequencies that he's never heard before, and it doesn't sound like you, does it?
That's right.
It is you. You're just hearing it differently, so thanks. And if you were to do, each one of you, to do that in your own rooms, you'd make that same discovery. I made that discovery quite by accident, and as I continued to practice with it, I've now tuned my ears enough so that I can hear that hot band of high energy without having to have the baffle around my ears. I've readjusted my expectations to catch that. It's those upper frequencies that give the penetration to the voice. So it's a natural phenomenon, but getting your tongue in a different place in your mouth is the secret to being able to let those sounds, which are naturally in your voice, out. So I'd like to have you say, how are we doing on time? I got about... Thank you very much. So would you all say the word please? Elongate the E. Please. You see where your tongue is? It draws back. It spreads between your molars. And it creates a really buzzy sound right at the back of your mouth around your molars. It has a kind of a secondary vibration on the bridge of your nose or on your cheekbones, but it's a lot of energy right at the back of your tongue. Do that again. Please. Now take your thumb and hit yourself underneath your chin and say please again. Please. You feel it bear down? That's the base of your tongue bearing down. That's an American E vowel that's stiff. And if you were to take that, please, it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter the higher you go in your scale, because it's made out of tension. Now say the word pizza. Pizza. Elongate the E. Pizza. And right away you can tell that doesn't feel the same in your mouth. Your tongue's in a different position. The vibrations are in a different place. Both of them are E vowels. One of them is a singing vowel. One of them is a vernacular speech vowel. Why do you want the singing vowel? Because when you sing, you have to elongate the sounds. And when you elongate the sounds, any tension will just be exaggerated. So, do that again, pizza, and punch in here, and you'll discover that there's no tension in the base of your tongue. Pizza, pizza. Good. So, let me see. I haven't asked you yet for a second. Fran, would you say, can you tell the difference between those vowels? Do they feel differently? Do they vibrate differently?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Are you familiar with the pizza E? Or did it surprise you?
No, I don't think it surprised me.
Okay, it's still an E vowel. Everybody recognizes it. You just make it a different way. Now, this thing that I'm going to kind of go through very quickly is a vowel equalization pattern. So would you say pizza and then go quickly back and forth between the E and the U? Why? Because the E is a closed vowel, the U is a closed vowel. E is forward, U is back. U normally gets swallowed in dark. E is penetrating. And so they don't match each other. But if you get the pizza E, P-U-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E, and you'll listen, and you'll hear them equalize. At first, they'll move back and forth in my mouth, and quickly they'll start to equalize so that the movement is not so different. You'll hear it as matching. Now, I want you to listen. I want you to listen and hear when they equalize. They share something in common. You still get E, you still get U, but they share something in common. And that thing that they share in common is that upper frequency that has always been there in the back of my throat, but when my tongue changes position, it's no longer blocking that sound. It's not baffling it. That sound comes out. Try it again. I want you to try it. Stop on the U. Okay, listen, I didn't say it soon enough. So do that. As soon as you feel those vowels equalize, stop on the U. Okay, Teresa, does that feel like a normal U?
No.
How's it different?
It's less harsh. It seems softer.
It's much less tense, so I'm translating what you're saying, but it's very more present. Most people, when they sing ooh, it has a hollow quality to it. You has a pointed quality to it. It's as if the U picks up some of the characteristics of the E picks up some of the warmth of the U. They share those characteristics, and they start to match each other. Now try E and A. E, A, yeah, 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 yeah. Stop on the A. Does that feel like an A?
No.
How's it different?
It's more relaxed.
It's more relaxed in your tongue, and that's the primary issue. What happens is that you're starting to form vowels inside your mouth instead of with the base of your tongue. And now, Dan, say your normal A.
A.
Now do equalize E,
A, A.
More forward, isn't it? It buzzes on the bridge of his teeth, on the bridge of his nose. It's in that area, not back at the back. So take A. Now say the word chaos. K. All right. So A-O, 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 A-O. Stop on the O. Does that feel like a normal O? No, it's more forward. It buzzes in the front of your mouth. It has more penetration power in it because the tongue is no longer blocking the back. The sounds that are naturally there at the laryngeal level have a way of getting out because the tongue is not baffling or muting them out. So take wah, wah, wah. We're doing O to ah. Wah, 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 wah. Stop on the ah. I ask you, does that feel like a normal ah? No, it's not. Normally it's ah. And you could hear just as soon as I changed those vowels how lively the ah became and how penetrating it was. So if I now go ya, 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 which is A and ah. Ya, 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 stop at the ah. There again, you've come to that same sort of bright, penetrating ah that sounds like ah, that takes no pressure inside your body. So let's review what we've just done today. We've discovered that with the flow of your breath through the straw, you can move up and down in your range quite readily. That when you flip over into that light voice and then take the straw out and return to a singing sound, it's actually much richer and fuller than you thought it was. That when you go from the high to the low, and you get to the low and it sounds kind of gravelly, and you pull the straw out, it's much richer than you expected it to be. So what we're really doing is playing with your expectations, right? So that you've got a perceptual problem about what you think is happening versus what really is happening. So you've got a mental adjustment to make to allow for that flowing phonation or the straw therapy. So then, what else did we do? We talked about finding the threshold. And that was, again, breath-driven and less tense. And what was your response to that? when you got to the threshold, it felt different than what you were used to. Is there a pattern developing here? Something's different about the way that you sing when you sing efficiently and healthily. When you hit that threshold of efficiency, your voice leaps out into the room, but you can't tell it because you don't have the muscle tension, the tightness that normally tells you where you are. So then, Eric says, well, but that's all nice and warm and mellow. It's richer and all of that. But where's the extra sound that comes to give it penetration? So then we went through 5 cardinal vowels. And in every single case, they all felt different than normal. Doesn't that just give you such a sense of confidence about how to go forward? All you have to do is change everything about what you're doing, and you'll be just fine. But nothing that we've talked about today is abnormal. All of it is just sort of normal. And if you capture one of those things and don't get the rest, you're better off. You get 2 of those things, you're better off than if you got 1. You get 3 of them, you're better off than if you get 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter because you've already been successful as callers up to this point. But you're looking for ways to improve upon what you're doing. First and foremost, if you want to change the range of your voice, make your voice driven by airflow rather than by compression. You can succeed with compression, but compression wears your voice out over a period of time. The second thing that you can do is you can become familiar with that point of efficiency when your voice really hits that threshold, that point of efficiency. And when you get there, you'll need, in the early stages, somebody else to tell you that you've gotten there. As a listener, you'll hear it because it'll just blossom. The sound will blossom. It'll become full, rich, harmonic, and easy. And then as your partner points out when you've hit that point, then you have to become familiar with the sensations that go along with that. And I can tell you from my experience that it's a little bit like riding a bicycle. Once you've found that point of efficiency, it's a very distinctive sensation that all you have to do is to tell your subconscious mind, I want to stay on that threshold of efficiency. And the body will make the necessary adjustments to allow you to go up in the range and down in the range and stay on that threshold. It's a very, very distinctive bodily sensation when you hit that threshold. Vowel equalization is another one of those places where you get the 2 vowels in alternation and they seem to fall into a groove. And that groove, that tracking position, is so distinctive in its sensations that when you get it, you recognize it. And when you step off of it, you lose that sensation. So it isn't as if you have to go out blind waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do. You do have a modicum of experience with it, and you just go and make application about it. There are 3 other things to be done. Do I have time to keep going, or have I run out of time? Great. Okay, so now the weirdest of them all. I've puzzled for a long time how to make singing more simple and more efficient. And it dawned on me in a period of time when I was trapped in a convocation exercise at the university, which I find to be the most tedious and the most boring of all, and my mind was wandering away somewhere. What could I do to find a more spontaneous way to teach singing? And it dawned on me that all of us were at our greatest vocal efficiency the first time we cried, when we were first born. That when we come to this earth, we are hardwired to do 3 things. We're hardwired to suckle, to breathe, and to cry. And those are survival techniques, and so they're hardwired. And almost everything else that we have to learn has to be learned. But those things we get hardwired. And the nice thing about a baby cry is that it's not nice when you're the parent, but the baby never stops. It never gets tired. It never gets hoarse. It never wears out. The other thing is that it penetrates like crazy. I mean, it's just a sweet little, and if you listen to the actual sound, it's really puny sound, but it penetrates walls. It can go forever. And so now the real hard thing is to refine that. And if it's hardwired in us, we should be able to refine that. Well, I couldn't practice while I was in the middle of the convocation. I was so excited with the idea. And as soon as it was over, I ran back to my office and started playing with it. And there was this moment of, I don't remember and you'll have that same sensation yourself. But then I just screwed up my courage and said, who cares? Just try anyway. And here's what the result was. And now that I've learned how to do that, my wife is so aggravated because she... The truth of the matter is that that is so simple to do. And it's not hard. It's not physically tiring at all. It's a little burst of energy. And I'm going to break it down for you. Actually, I'm going to get you to do that. And you'll do it in a group. And just concentrate on your own self-consciousness. Don't worry about the self-consciousness of everybody else. We spent our lives trying to get away from being babies. And this is the way that you get back home. Wah, wah. You'll do it at your own pitch level. Don't feel like you have to do it at mine. Go. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, well, you all decided on the same pitch anyway, but the idea was that it happens very spontaneously, and there are several characteristics that can be useful to you. The first thing that I got when I did that was that it felt like it was right in my nose. It was right near here. In my nose, it felt like. But I tested. It's not in your nose. It's way forward. The vibrations are way forward, so it feels like it's in your nose. But if it were in your nose, it would sound like this. Because the thing about a baby cry, spontaneously, is that the roof of your mouth, the soft palate, goes up and closes off the nasal ports so that no sound actually goes in the nose. So that's the second part of it. First of it feels really forward. The second is that the nasal ports close. Why? Because that's how the sound hits the hard palate and emanates out into the room. And if it goes up into the nose, it loses power. And since it's a question of survival, the baby doesn't do that. The third thing is that it always starts with a W or a closed mouth. You'll see a baby go, wah, 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 wah. They'll always start in a closed position or with a ooh, ooh, because when you do that, it gets the vocal folds started vibrating gently. And then, as soon as it's got its voice started, it goes to the nastiest vowel in the language. Wah, wah. You hear it? Wah, wah. There's always a gentility to the start. It's never until they're about 4 months old and have learned how to manipulate their parents. But they start out in that hardwired wah, 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 wah. And you can hear it. It's not a loud sound. It's just an extremely penetrating sound. Well, annoying, yeah, but not so. It's just children, little babies are night. It's 3 o'clock in the morning where they're aggravating. Now, watch what happens with your breathing. Do it. Wah, 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 wah. And you'll notice that every time you go to make the sound, something quite spontaneously happens down here. It's so spontaneous that when I first started to observe it, I couldn't feel where it was starting. The place I could feel it was when I finished. I released and I went, whoa, something's been going on there. And so I started watching a little more carefully. There's a little engagement that's really proportional to the amount of energy. And since I'm going very gently, it doesn't take very much energy to get it started. You don't have to study a lot about how to breathe. You already know how to do that. We knew that when we began. So try that and you'll see. Wah, 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 wah. You feel it. There's something very spontaneous and proportional to the breathing. The fourth thing that I want you to point out to you is that when you're here in your throat, do it, and I'll try to show you what's going on. Go. Wah, 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 wah. There's a sense of release in the throat rather than clamping down. Not quack like a duck. Quack, quack, quack. You feel the compression that's there? Now the baby cry. Wah, wah, wah. So the pattern that you're trying to establish for yourselves is a forward placement. How does it get forward? I'm sort of going to what Eric was asking a bit ago. How does it get forward? In the baby cry, the tongue moves out of the throat. The sound hits into the hard palate. It excites the bones in your face, which it makes it feels like it's in your nose, and it projects out into space. The vocal folds are not compressed. They're released. They're on that Bernoulli. They're on that threshold immediately. The amount of air that's delivered is spontaneous and very natural. So I want you to sing with me Home on the Range, a la Baby Cry. Wah, 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 wah. Did you notice that as you started climbing up the scale, it got really easy to do? Wah, wah, wah. There was nothing effortful. There was nothing anxietous about that. It just flows right out. Here's how many minutes? I'm not done yet. What I want you to do is to start that baby cry and inflect it upwards and inflect it downwards, like this. Wah, 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 wah. You'll see. It'll go real easy. Go. Wah, 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 wah. That's right. It's all based upon a pattern of spontaneous activity, release in the throat, high soft palate, placement in the nose. And now inflect downward. Wah, 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 wah. You got a really wide range as soon as you set up that pattern. There's more that we could do, but we'll stop on that. So the notion that I'm trying to get at are simple, natural ways where you can improve the efficiency of your voice as you try to inflect upwards, downwards, and get the quality so that it's more pleasant and natural. Yes, dear.
Jerry Junk, Nebraska. How many have witnessed Arden for the first time? You have been privy to something very special. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were here in 1976. That was the first time that I saw you. Or 77, something like that. It was early on.
It was pretty early on. This is my 30th year here.
Yes.
So I think I came in 1980.
Well,
whenever Kansas City was. That was
yeah,
the first time.
I think it's a little earlier than that. Anyway, I've had the privilege of knowing Arden for all these years, and he understands voice for the things that we need to do, and his presentations are superb, and it's been a great 30 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You guys are terrific, and we laid around and played around for a couple hours. I'll be working with folks through the course of the remainder of the couple of days here. I got callers coach this afternoon, ladies and calling tomorrow. Try to address the interests that are unique to you. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Let's go eat.